Well, good morning, friends. It's great to be with you this morning. Good to have you all join us for our monthly webinar. As most of you know, we host multiple webinars every month through the National Family Justice Center Alliance, and we're very happy to have you all here with us today for what will be a great webinar with JoAnn Goodwin and Christie Munson from the California Victim Compensation Program. So we're very honored to have them involved with the Victim Compensation Program presentation today. This webinar is sponsored by Verizon Foundation. About half of our webinars are sponsored by Verizon as part of our Family Justice Center Institute training program, and about half of our webinars are sponsored by the Office on Violence Against Women. So we very much appreciate their support in being able to put on multiple webinars every month. Before we dive into the subject matter, I've got to make a plug for our big International Family Justice Center Conference, which is just 3 weeks away in San Antonio, Texas. We've got almost 400 folks registered for the conference. And if you are not familiar with it or not attending and you have interest, please go to FamilyJusticeCenter.org and you can see the agenda. We have a great lineup of folks coming, including the new director of the Office on Violence Against Women, Sue Carbon. Judge Sue Carbon was just appointed by President Obama and confirmed by the Senate and has now taken office. She's a family court judge from New Hampshire and has a very distinguished career working on issues related to domestic violence. So we have a great faculty and just a great team of folks. We have teams coming from all over the country to the conference, really looking at issues not just about substantive training for those working in the field of domestic violence, but specifically looking at best practices in how shelters and police departments and prosecutors' offices and others can co-locate services to better serve victims of domestic violence and their kids. As I mentioned, I'm Casey Gwynn. I'm the president of the Family Justice Center Alliance. Gail and I share responsibilities with these. We're not able to have Gail on the call today. She's actually presenting at a major national conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico today on the Family Justice Center model to over 500 folks, and then doing some specialized training on strangulation, which is one of the areas we focus on in our national training work. I always brag about our team. Brenda Lugo, who is in charge of all of our webinars, of course, is the most important one to me today because she's the reason I'm competent at managing a webinar, because Brenda does all the work. And you can see the rest of our very small but mighty team, as Gail refers to them, that work on our work, not just in the United States, but around the world. And then there's a slide on the screen that, for those of you that are just listening by audio, I will read because it gives you some directions that are really important for this session. This webinar presentation is being recorded and will be posted on our website by the end of today. We'd like to remind you that in order to download webinar files and other materials from our resource library on our website, FJC Alliance membership is required, and that membership is free. It doesn't cost anything. It just takes a couple minutes to become a member. If you are already a member of the Alliance, you can log in and then access this webinar and download it for reuse and to share with others. Please note that registering for today's live webinar training does not sign you up as a member of the Alliance. We have a lot of folks. We have close to 300 folks on this call. We have a lot of folks who think that just because they registered for one of the National Family Justice Center Alliance webinars that they actually are members of the Alliance, and that's not the case. So if you want to be able to access this, you do have to join at FamilyJusticeCenter.org. If you wish to become a member and obtain login credentials, as it says there, you just go to FamilyJusticeCenter.org, click on Get Involved, and then become a member. It takes about 24 hours for us to review applications, and then once we review and approve it, you'll be notified by email. So I share that information so that you have a good sense of what to do in order to access this information going forward. We're very honored today to have two very distinguished presenters, both of whom are part of the leadership team of the California Victim Compensation Program. JoAnn Goodwin, who's the Assistant Deputy Executive Officer of the program and has been with the program since 1992. And I've been very honored to interact with JoAnn over the years and have so much respect for her. She actually began her career processing claims, and so she has a real kind of grassroots knowledge from the ground floor up of how this works for crime victims, what the needs are of crime victims, and she very much has kind of grown up in the program and manages the day-to-day operations. She does have a background volunteering with the El Dorado Women's Center and serving on their board, and has also been involved in volunteer with domestic violence and sexual assault hotline. So we're just so honored to have JoAnn join us today. Christie Munson is also going to be part of this presentation. Christie is the manager of the County Liaison and Support Section of the California Victim Compensation Program. Christie actually began her career in victim services in Iowa in 1986, and has worked as the director of a sexual assault center in Iowa, has a great background working with crime victims in general and with victims of sexual assault, worked with the National Sexual Assault Coalition Resource Sharing Project, which was a VAWA-funded training program for all the sexual assault coalitions in the United States, and has worked in the field of victim compensation since 2001. She actually currently supervises and monitors, supervises the unit, that County Liaison and Support Section unit, that monitors all the local offices in California for the program, of which there are 21. So we're very honored to have both of you join us this morning. So JoAnn and Christie, welcome. We're going to turn the screen over to you, and you'll be able to click on your slides and begin your presentation.
Okay. This is JoAnn Goodwin. Thank you, Casey, and my co-presenter, Christie Munson.
Hi.
Hello,
Thank you,
Christie. We'd like to thank Casey Gwynn and the Family Justice Center Alliance team for this opportunity this morning to share with all of you about the Victims Compensation and Government Claims Board, and specifically to the California Victim Compensation Program. So thank you. And as we go through this, be sure to use your question feature at your toolbar to send questions for us. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started and give you a little bit of history about the California Victim Compensation Program. It was created in 1965, and we were the first program in the nation, third in the world. Currently, we're the largest program in the United States. All 50 states, including the District of Columbia and U.S. territories, have programs, which is really wonderful. We're really proud to be part of that. 60% of our money come from VOCA awards, and the balance of that is through California restitution, which we'll speak of a little bit through this presentation. We're going to talk mostly, we'll be referring to statistical information from the fiscal year of 08-09, and we're pretty pleased to share with you that 96% of our claims were approved for payment in 2008-09. And our payments last year were at $94 million, which you can see in a moment how we have, back to 05-06, have been doing that stair-step climb, and we're really proud that we'll be able to help the victims in California. And as we move forward to our next slide, there we go. As far as, here we are, we're still in payments in one more. Okay, so here of the $94 million that we did pay out to victims in California, you can see how it's broken down as far as our medical and dental is our highest at $33 million, almost $34 million. And then next is mental health, which we know in California that that's a pretty high number compared to a lot of the other state programs, as looking at the OVC website. And through our wage and support loss, which is, so critical many times, that is what we do have a statute that allows victims to request that they only want to have their wage loss paid, and they'll deal with the medical bills and so on at a later time, so they can keep their mortgages paid, keep food on the table, things of that nature. And then our funeral burial, it's might be sad to say, but it's, up there in 13 million, as well as there's other expenses there. As far as for the other expenses is, when we're talking about relocation, many times for our domestic violence, sexual assault victims, residential security, crime scene cleanup, attorney payments, and miscellaneous expenses. And the residential security, crime scene, relocation, we'll talk about a little bit later on as well. Okay. Whoops. I got to do that. Oh, let me just go back one. Sorry about that.
Just a bit of a warning, there's a little delay there, so when you click it, it will change. It just takes a couple of seconds because of the internet speed.
Yeah, I'll get used to it. Sorry. Yeah, we won't get so anxious there to move forward. And here's some of our statistical data for fiscal year 08-09. The number of applications that we received, 54,000. And here is a little bit of the demographics of the applications as far as our direct victims, our derivative victims, and female victims, male victims, child, adults, domestic violence. We really wanted to point out as far as with those domestic violence claims that, 24%, which is a really large percentage for domestic violence victims. So here we go. We're going to talk about who's eligible. So if you are a resident of California at the time of the crime, that would qualify you to submit an application to us. If you are a member of the military, if you're stationed in California, we would recognize that as a qualifying application as well. And if you are a crime victim, or if you're coming to visit the state of California, and unfortunately if you became a victim of a crime, then we would assist you as well with your application here. So in order to, once we receive an application and to qualify it through our eligibility, typically it requires a physical injury or a threat of physical injury. And for certain crimes, emotional injury is all that needs to be shown. We're looking for a preponderance of evidence in that area that a crime occurred. And for the most part, it would be through crime reports. However, for our domestic violence, we have a broader regulation that allows us to qualify victims for our program through maybe through letters from the shelter directors, from there's medical reports that, so we're looking at the whole picture there. And here's the examples of qualifying crimes, which we cover many, most all, as far as where there would be a physical injury or a threat of physical injury, and also the emotional injury. And as you saw that, there were only 6% that didn't qualify or had been denied for reasons, and these are typical reasons that an application would be denied. The involvement in the crime, the lack of cooperation. We're looking for that cooperation with law enforcement as we move further through the process of the opportunity to maybe collect restitution when there is a offender identified. And okay, here we go. We have two types of victims. This is some of our own language within our program. And we have a direct victim who is pretty self-explanatory, who's a sustained injury or threat of injury or death. And then we have minors who reside in a household where domestic violence occurred. And that was something that through legislation in 2003 where we were able to qualify minors. We don't do a lot of preventive. We're usually after the fact as far as being the victims of crime program. So this is an opportunity that where maybe we can help with a minor to make them a direct victim to get the highest benefit for mental health treatment as they grow through the years. Our derivative victims, and we have quite a laundry list of derivative victims through our statute, is an immediate family member or the following, which is a spouse, sibling, parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, a person that was living in the household at the time of the crime, or they lived together for 2 years, domestic partners, someone that's become a primary caretaker. So we're really, really looking out for how we could qualify a derivative victim. Okay, and as we're moving right along here to a victim, a derivative victim, and when we're a felon, the program may not we cannot reimburse for any expenses that were incurred while a person is on felony probation, parole, or is incarcerated. However, we can take applications, we can qualify applications, but we can't pay for any of the expenses during that time. And once they are off probation or no longer incarcerated, we will not go back and make payments on those. So during that period of time, there will never be any kind of expenses that will be paid. However, we can pay for a deceased felon's funeral burial expense that if the person that's requesting the reimbursement is not a felon, and that would be an example, a mother that has a son or a child that is a felon at the time that they were murdered, and the mother is picking up the funeral burial expense. We could reimburse the mother as long as she's not a felon. This is Christie. I wanted to take over so JoAnn can get a little bit of rest for a minute. And I wanted to, Brenda very kindly asked me to remind you to, if you have questions for us, to submit them using the question toolbar as we're going through the presentation, and then we'll have time to address them at the end, and we'll try and address everyone's questions. And also, if we don't get to everyone's questions, we can do that in writing and post it on the website later. I wanted to just skip back to when we were talking just briefly about denial. One of the reasons that sometimes claims get denied is lack of cooperation with law enforcement. And I know that can be an issue with domestic violence cases. And one of the things that we do look at when we're looking at the lack of cooperation and reviewing it to see what's going on, we do take the safety of the person into consideration and and some other mitigating factors. So I know if you're working in a family justice center or you're acting as an advocate for a domestic violence victim, it's really helpful when you're working with your local, either in California or your other state programs, to make sure that people who are in the compensation program have as much information as possible about what's going on with that situation, because we can sometimes, we do want to take safety and issues like that into consideration. Right. Yes, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Let me talk a little bit about our timeline for applying. We do have a time limit for application. It's 1 year after the date of the incident. For minors, in general, it's 1 year after their 18th birthday, but we just recently had legislation that changed that for cases of sexual abuse, so it matches our California Penal Code, which goes up to the 28th birthday. And then sometimes there are other situations where maybe something wasn't discovered to be a crime until later, or maybe there was a suspicious death where there wasn't evidence until a few years later that shows that it was actually a murder. And so then our application time limit starts at the time that it's decided that something is a crime. And we also have reasons, ways that we can allow something when someone is a little bit late. For instance, if it's a cold case hit, for instance, on DNA, and then we would, there's no prosecution, and the folks, didn't have an application when the crime originally happened, but then there's a prosecution sometimes 10, 15 years later. We can go back and allow that because they're helping with the prosecution of the crime. So there's lots of different reasons that we can go back and look at that, and we do have a structure for that. So again, that's a place where people who are helping domestic violence victims can give information to the compensation workers that can sometimes help get that application accepted as late. We do have require a crime report. in a few different places. We also use Child Protective Services reports for our general crimes, getting those determined to be eligible. For domestic violence, we have some other considerations. We do often use temporary or permanent restraining orders. We can go with records from a battered women's shelter or other type of crime. What our rule for the California program in determining eligibility is that we need to establish a preponderance of evidence that a crime occurred. Of course, when you're prosecuting a crime, as in the United States anyway, you need to look to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime occurred. Preponderance of evidence is a little bit lower standard, so when we're looking and there isn't a law enforcement report, we look to sometimes a combination of these other sources to get that preponderance of evidence. And sometimes it's tricky and it takes some time, but we do our best to look at other sources when we don't have a law enforcement report. And for human trafficking, we also will use an affidavit from a human trafficking caseworker, something from U.S. Department of Health and Services, things like that. So that's often a more complex situation. We have actually a great system in California for helping people with emergency awards. And because I'll talk a little bit more about our structure of satellite offices, but we are able to help folks when they need certain expenses to be paid immediately. And usually that's surrounding funeral and burial expenses or relocation in the case of somebody whose safety is threatened, domestic violence or homicide survivors, things like that. So, and we'll talk about those in detail. But we do have the ability to issue emergency payments, and that's another thing where when you're working with a crime victim in the field, if you know something's an emergency, it really helps to pass that information on to the compensation program because we do have to show that it's an emergency in order to be able to issue that payment. We can only pay losses that occur as a direct result of a crime, and it has to be a loss that isn't reimbursed by any other source. And we'll talk about how we try and maintain the stability of our restitution fund by accessing insurance and other reimbursement sources. We also can't pay for property losses. That's pretty much across the board in the United States. Compensation programs aren't able to do that, with a few exceptions, because there's not quite enough money, I think, to cover all of the property losses that are included in crime. But we are able to pay for some things in medical expenses, and I'll get to those in a moment. We have a $70,000 maximum reimbursement on a single claim. Other programs, other states have a variety of different maximum amounts. Ours is one of the highest. And there's also other limits within that $70,000. For instance, we have a $7,500 cap on funerals. We have a $2,000 cap on relocation for the most part, and we have session limits for mental health, and we can't go above mental health, above $10,000, and we'll talk more about that in mental health assistance without dire and exceptional need. Our medical expenses that we cover are pretty much wide-ranging. This doesn't even include all of them on this slide: ambulance, hospital, physician, chiropractor, physical therapist, dental care, in-home care from skilled nursing or family, unskilled nursing like a family member when somebody's had a catastrophic injury. The property that we can cover is eyeglasses, hearing aids that are lost or damaged as a result of the crime, prosthetic devices that are lost or damaged as a result of the crime, or of course prosthetic devices that are needed as a result of the crime, or eyeglasses or hearing aids that are needed because of an injury. We can replace wheelchairs or pay for them if someone needs one after a crime, or if their wheelchair is lost or damaged, things like that. And we do make some home and vehicle modifications. When somebody has a catastrophic injury that's going to be with them for their entire lifetime, like paraplegia or quadriplegia. That can involve all kinds of expenses, and we'll go into those in a little bit of more detail. The cosmetic surgery we cover, in case anyone has any questions about that, is all related to repairing damage that may have been caused by an injury. It doesn't, doesn't really cover other types of cosmetic surgery. One of the important things to know if you're helping a crime victim in California is that medical and mental health expenses, if the provider accepts our payment, that's considered payment in full. So sometimes we'll get a hospital or some provider who will try and ask the victim to pay an additional amount. Well, we have a process with a bill with our medical rates, our payments for medical rates, that goes that pays Medi-Cal plus 20%, or Medicare, excuse me, plus 20% for our medical expenses, and then we pay at the Medicare rate for durable medical equipment, and we have a couple of different rates, 75% for dental. And so when we get a medical bill in, we apply that rate, and just like an insurance company would. So most providers are quite used to this, and they'll accept the rate and consider that payment. But occasionally we'll get one who doesn't and tries to charge the victim. And so it's important for advocates to know that medical and mental health providers can't do that. They do need to accept our payment. Once they've cashed the check, that's it. Our mental health benefits, our initial mental health benefits are limited to 40 sessions for direct victims, 30 sessions for derivative victims who are minors or caretakers, and 15 for other derivative victims. Or if it's a survivor of a homicide victim or a vehicular homicide victim, it's 30 sessions. Now, we do offer sessions beyond these limits, but it requires the provider to submit an additional treatment plan. We actually have 2 treatment plans that providers are required to fill out. They're required to fill out and keep in their file an initial treatment plan when they're working with us after the first 5 sessions. And then when they get to the 30, like if they're working with somebody who's got a 40-session limit, they get to about the 35th session, then they submit to us an additional treatment plan if they feel that that person still needs more sessions. And we have a consulting psychologist and a social worker on staff here who review those treatment plans, and then they will issue, an additional session limit depending on what the provider has said the victim needs. And so we often, when someone needs additional treatment, are able to go beyond that 40 or 30 session limit. We also offer the income and support loss, as JoAnn was saying earlier. That it has a 5-year period of income loss for the victim or support loss for the spouse of the direct victim. Minors can receive benefits up until they're 18, but there is a $70,000 total maximum for the entire family, basically. So it's not every claim doesn't have a $70,000 limit. In the case of income or support loss, it's one $70,000 limit. That's a really complex. Sorry, I moved the slide too quickly. Income and support loss is a really complex benefit to administer, and it often requires us gathering a lot of different information in order to get a clear picture of what somebody's income really was and what the loss is. And so that sometimes takes time and patience on the part of everybody to get all that information in the door before we can start paying. We also, it's really important as an advocate if you're working with somebody out in the field to let them know that they do have to have income before we can replace it. A lot of folks want to, check income loss on the application, but if they weren't employed, it's funeral burial. We pay for up to $7,500 for funeral expenses or burial expenses. We just had a change in our regulations, actually, that adds also pay up to $500 within that $7,500 for food and drink, not alcoholic beverages, but other food and drink, and then we can pay for the other usual and customary costs associated with a funeral. We can pay costs to transport body. We have costs to transport bodies. We transport to bodies to Mexico, being that we're a border state on a regular basis for burial there. And we can pay travel costs for one person to accompany the body or to go and make funeral arrangements. We also have the ability to work directly with the funeral home, and this is another part where our place where our revolving fund or emergency awards come into place. When folks go to our local offices, we can help them, because usually a funeral is an unexpected emergency. People don't plan for that expense, and so it can be really stressful. And another place where it's really helpful for the advocate or the worker who's directly working with that person to make sure that they're in communication with the funeral home, acting as sometimes you really have to make sure that the funeral home is explaining things to people. It's so hard for them in crisis to grasp, all of these issues sometimes. So it's really helps the advocates. The more they know about how to administer this benefit, the better when you're working directly with somebody. Okay, then I guess I just went on. I should have clicked my slide. We also ask advocates to help us obtain information about reimbursement sources like auto insurance and speed verification, especially in an emergency funeral. So we'll be asking folks to get the declaration page of the auto insurance, or at least the auto insurance information, so we can check that, because we do try and coordinate those benefits to maximize them for the claimant. Okay, this is JoAnn again, and I'm going to talk about our relocation benefits. And we have several slides on this, and it's one of these types of benefits that takes a lot of work on our end and a lot of cooperation with the advocate as well as with the victim on this to gather everything that we need. We're a small program, but we're kind of complex in this area. But our goal is to assist that victim for their safety. So we have a $2,000 per household relocation benefit, and this statute came into effect in 2000. We were pretty excited about this. This is really, really just a great, wonderful way to help. And as Christie was talking about our emergency funding, this is one of the areas with the funeral, burial, and relocation where we access that our emergency funds. So these are for direct victims only, and in our statute it requires a recommendation from a law enforcement for their personal safety, or many times domestic violence victims don't want to go to law enforcement. They can access a mental health provider, and the mental health provider would complete it that it's for their emotional well-being. We may pay for more than one relocation for crime, provided that all relocations are combined do not exceed that $2,000. And we'll go a little bit further in here. There's also some new legislation that allows for higher payments in a dire and exceptional circumstances that just became effective this year. Okay, so these are typical relocation expenses. Rental housing, we have, can pay for security deposits, first and last month's rent, and generally we pay these directly to the landlord. That is, they work directly with us. They're much more comfortable talking to us. Pretty much we can't guarantee anything. We give them our disclaimer about that we'll be sending that check directly to them. We can cover utility deposits, telephone deposits, temporary lodging. If somebody needs to get out of the house, we can cover for some hotel costs. Also, when they're immediately leaving the house, emergency food and clothing, things that they wouldn't have been able to, have a baby, there's no diapers, there's no baby bottles, there's no formula that they would immediately need. We can also, when there's a little bit more planning here as far as related to moving expenses, pay for the rental of a truck, or in some instances where they're just going to move everything out and they can store it, put it in a storage, and move in with a friend or family member until they decide what they're going to do. Many times we see travel, and we like to see one-way airline tickets or bus tickets or train tickets. We see them quite often, to go home to back to their family, and we're always, we feel good about that they're going to get back to a safe place. And when they're on their travel, if they're using their own car, then at that time we can pay for the cost of gas, for that trip. For relocation issues, more than one move is now covered, and that may take place, long after the crime. And there's instances where we had to move them. They moved quickly, or they accessed temporary housing, and now they're at a better place, and where they can maybe make some permanent housing, and there's still money left in that $2,000 limit. It covers any direct victim, also surviving household members of a deceased victim. So from 2000, as we've moved along with our legislation, we are always kind of moving to do cleanup on our relocation legislation. Domestic violence and sexual assault victims must agree not to inform the offender of their new residence. And that's usually not a problem, but it does say that in our statute, so we need to make sure that the victims know that. We have relocation forms. We have a lot of paperwork that we have to fill out. There's, and it states that a lot of it for the verification purpose, as well as in our statute, where I talked about just a couple slides ago about a law enforcement relocation benefit verification form. Again, that's what we would require when they're moving for their safety. And from a mental health provider relocation benefit verification form, when they are going to see a mental health provider, and it's for their emotional well-being.
Oh, can I
say please.
Something? On those two forms, this is Christie speaking, the law enforcement and mental health providers can write letters. The statute really just requires that they make a determination of either in law enforcement who needs to move for physical safety or mental health for emotional well-being. But we created the forms to make it easier for them, and especially I think law enforcement officers really appreciate the forms because they can just write one sentence and sign it and check off the boxes and send it in rather than having to sit down and write a whole letter. And the same with mental health providers. It sort of helps them to see what kinds of questions we have. But it's not required, and sometimes we use a letter from the assistant district attorney or something else.
Yeah, we whatever we can get that we feel like that it qualifies or meets our statutes, we'll take it. We actually had completed a pilot, I'm going to say back in 2004, in Alameda County in California. That's the Oakland area, where when we had first come out with the statute, we were just it was so new to us, we were all over the place, and law enforcement was a little resistant to write letters because they felt that they may be held liable. So through that pilot, we introduced these forms, explained what we were doing, and we've just got a lot more cooperation from law enforcement. Moving on to coordinating our resources, we have Section 8 in California, which assists residents of California, and in Section 8, they will cover the rental of an apartment or a home, but they won't cover the deposits, and so that's how we coordinate with different agencies throughout in California to assist the victim as best as we possibly can, and that's one way that we do it. Through domestic violence shelters, we, as they're coming out of transitional housing, then we work with them to help them move forward. And then also to the California Witness Protection Program. The advocates, we work directly with them. Actually, part of our restitution fund funds this through I think it's the Attorney General's office, right? And advocates may coordinate benefits if the claim is eligible for both programs. Routinely, they would access from them first and then come to us secondary.
This is Christie speaking again, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the advocate's role in relocation. Again, this is it's a somewhat complex thing to administer, and so it's really helpful when somebody is working directly with the victim to make sure that they understand what's going on and assist them in getting the appropriate documents together. We do ask for receipts if this is one place where we don't work always on a reimbursement basis. So if somebody needs to go rent a truck and they don't have enough money to rent a truck, we will front them the money, but they need to bring us the receipt back because you don't always have that money ahead of time. You can't always, in this situation, actually put that money forward. So we do. It's one benefit that requires a lot of communication to administer. Also, address changes get really tricky. If we're sending someone a check and they're in the middle of moving from one place to another, we really need clear information about where they're going to be when the check comes, and that often we end up having to deal with getting money to the right place at the right time. It gets very complicated.
JoAnn and Christie, this is Casey. Just a quick time check. If we can aim for finishing the presentation in about 15 minutes, then we'll have 30 minutes for questions. We have a lot of questions that we can spend time on, a lot of very interesting questions. So just a quick time check.
Okay. Well, we have other benefits. They include crime scene cleanup, home security, home and vehicle modification, and job retraining. On home security is one that is frequently accessed. It has a $1,000 limit. It also requires a recommendation from law enforcement or a mental health provider, so it's similar to relocation in that way. The home and vehicle modification, as I said before, is really used in cases where there's catastrophic injuries such as paraplegia, quadriplegia, and people need to be able to get into their house, to get, sometimes that involves bathroom remodels or things like that, getting hand controls on a car. So that's another benefit that can be kind of complex to administer. I won't go into all of the details, but it is really important for people to know about, and that usually doesn't come up until 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road when they've sort of gotten all their other needs met, and then here we are, and we're sometimes able to really help out with some important changes that improve people's quality of life. 2 years ago, we had a new program, a new statute that gave us another program where we can help folks, and it's not very well known yet, and I want to really stress how important it is. It's the minor witness benefit. When a minor who suffered an emotional injury as a direct result of witnessing a violent crime, they can get up to $5,000 for mental health counseling. This is intended not for minors who are in direct line of fire in a violent crime, but maybe someone who's witnessed something happen across the street or in the schoolyard, and it's had a devastating effect on them. Because the legislature and the administration acknowledged when they passed this law that violent crime has a really serious effect, especially in some neighborhoods where there's, things happen on a regular basis, and kids end up witnessing a lot more than not to. So this is an important new benefit that I think we're trying to make sure people know about. We do ask everybody to access the reimbursement sources, health and dental insurance. We use Medi-Cal or Medicare as a reimbursement source, and workers' compensation. I won't go into all the details on that, but we do. The point of this is that we want to maximize the amount of money we have in our restitution fund so we can keep helping people, and also help people make the most of their benefits so that we don't just spend it all on a hospital bill that could be covered some other way. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that as far as, as anybody that is receiving VOCA funds, we are the payer of last resort, and that is in the VOCA guidelines for us. So we do look for that through verification. Oh, hold on. Oh, too far.
It went too far. Hold on. I'll get back there.
There we go.
We also look at civil suits, vehicle insurance, business insurance, and homeowners insurance. One other thing I want to say is that everybody has the right to appeal our decisions. We do have an appeals process. So if we deny a bill or deny eligibility on a claim, we have a whole unit that deals with people's appeals, and we have hearing officers that meet with people, and sometimes people are able to give us more information and get those decisions overturned. One of the things I want to say about the first line service providers and advocates, police officers, assistant district attorneys, shelter workers, folks who are working in the Family Justice Center, they're really our first point of contact with crime victims, and that's how most people get in the door. In California, most of our applications are submitted, are represented by victim advocates in local victim witness centers. And so it's really important, and I really appreciate this opportunity to help to educate people about compensation, because it's really important for, I think, the folks who are giving out the information to have accurate information. So if you're in a state, every compensation program would be happy to come and, I'm sure, to come and talk to you and let you know how to help. What? Compensation in California is decentralized, sort of. It's a complex structure. We have 21 local offices. I think one of the greatest services those local offices are able to do is connect people with local providers, stay in close touch with victim advocates, and we also have revolving funds at our local offices, so they're able to sort of take some shortcuts, not shortcuts, but they're able to quickly issue a check and not have to go through our usual centralized state process to issue a check for a funeral or a relocation payment, and that's very helpful. So when you're directing people to local office, it's good to know about that. We do, our local offices are DA-based, probation-based, and we also have 2 offices in local community-based organizations. They're all in local victim witness centers, and we do make sure that we've got our joint powers, our verification units, our claims units separated from the victim advocates, so that there's sort of a separation of duties there. That's very important to us. I've included a map. You can look at it so you can see what counties are associated with what local offices, and also directions on how to submit an application to the California VCP program, but I won't go into that. Okay, this is JoAnn again, and talking a little bit about some recent Cal VCP developments. We have our database system is known as our CARES system. We rolled out in 2007. And what's really great about that is the web-based program and application. And we have been able to allow advocates throughout California, I think about 450 of them now, that can actually access our system and be able to monitor and look at the status of applications that they have filed on behalf of their clients or victims. So that's great. We have a pilot going on for an online access, which is that where an advocate could go online, submit an application. There's no paperwork that way. We have that going on in 4 of these different counties here, and we're doing an assessment, and hopefully soon we'll be able to move forward with that and make it available to everyone. I want to talk to you about a little bit about where our money comes from. There's no taxpayer funding, and that's something I've always been really proud about working for this program, is that, we are collecting the money from the offenders and through traffic fines for the people that have committed these crimes against victims. We also receive our federal victims of crime, our VOCA money, which we talked about earlier, and a portion of the state penalty assessments.
We have growing partnerships that this has really been helpful for us here in California through the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So every $20 that a mom or boyfriend or girlfriend sends in, we're going to take 10 of that each time right off the top and put it back to the fund so we can help those victims coming in the door where there isn't an offender identified. All through Franchise Tax Board, we have a contract with them, as well as we have 25 CRC, these are compact restitution contracts that were with the DA's office throughout California. And here's a little bit about our county contracts through the restitution specialist. You know, when an application comes in, we immediately send them a task, which is an application, the name of the victim, as well as if there's an offender, and they start tracking that immediately. So their goal is to actually, even though we may not pay any money out that quick, we want to get a to-be-determined order filed so we can go back and make modifications for that at any time. We work with the board through these justice systems to ensure that fines and orders are imposed by that and provide restitution training to probation, district attorneys, public offenders, and judges. We also came out with, this is in early, let's see, 2000s, I think it was. 90, oh, excuse me, that was the one before, 93. We've been broke a couple times in California, but we put together an incentive to counties to collect fines and orders for that, and what that means is we gave them that incentive. They would go out and do those collections, that we would give them back 10%, which really helps each county. So that's a really good thing. We're working on coming up with more great ideas like that. We also have some other little programs. That's our Good Samaritan program, which may help pay for property damage, which we talked about we can't under the Victim Compensation Program, and also lost medical and dental and funeral burial expenses. There's a $10,000 benefit limit. It's a small program. It's not very well known, but if you access our website, you'll find it out there. The qualifying actions is that for a Good Samaritan claim is they're preventing a crime, or they're assisting law enforcement or public safety, or they're rescuing a victim of some other kind of incident or catastrophe, or providing assistance after the victim's life is in immediate danger. Our verification process is what is so is complex in all of our programs, and here it is as far as in with the Good Samaritan program. The appropriate law enforcement or public safety agency must provide a statement of cooperation and recommendation for verifying the facts. We also have Missing Children's Reward, and this program assists local law enforcement agencies and other parties in identification and recovery of missing children in California. It enhances the non-state reward funds and rewards individuals with up to $500 for information leading to the location and recovery of a missing child listed on the California Department of Missing Persons Registry. And here is how you order free materials from us. If you go to our website, you can fill out or fax a materials request form located in our publications section there. And there's our website there, calvcp.ca.gov. And for more information, please, here's our 1-800 number, here's our website, here's public affairs. And also, I just want to share with you on our website that we do have a video about the California program that you can, I think it's about 13 minutes long. You can go and view that, as well as that is the resource that you'd like to have. You can order that as well.
This is Christie speaking. In addition to the video being on our website, it's also on YouTube, and so you can look us up there. And we also are on Facebook, so you can, sign up for our page on Facebook. I think we're on Twitter too, and we have. So there's many ways you can get in touch with us. If you'd like to, you can contact our public affairs office or go onto our website. If you'd like to download our logo and link to us, we will help you do that too. The other important resource I wanted to mention just before we closed is the National Association of Crime Victim Compensation Boards, and we put their website on this last slide, nacvcb.org. That has a complete list of contact information for every compensation program funded by VOCA, so all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and the territories. So if you have somebody in another state who needs help, or if you're in another state and you want to contact your comp program, please this list. I think that's it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, JoAnn and Christie. Great information, great presentation. I have a whole lot of questions, though, coming in, so you're not done talking yet.
All right.
So we'll just dive in. I'll try to organize these a little bit for you as we go here. There's a variety of questions around kind of the relationship between what you've described for California and what would be going on in other states. Because we have a fair number of folks probably listening on this call who are not from California, who kind of wanted to get a sense of how a victim compensation program works. Can you just comment generally from, I mean, obviously every state has their own system, but there probably are a fair number of similarities between California's system and other states.
As we know, yes, in talking with other states, networking with other states, that every state has a different benefit limit. They're looking at qualifying victims again for the threat of injury, for injury, for emotional injury. They are looking for many times the collaboration with law enforcement. There's not all states have the restitution component to it. Some of them are handled through the workers' comp. Some of them are handled through their Attorney General's office. So there's a different gamut of ways that we are similar, we are familiar, and through the national with the annual conferences and the Western conferences coming up this month for the National Association, where we collaborate and assist. Many times in new legislation, is the first thing that we are going to do is Dan Eddy, which is the president of the National Association, we're going to email them and say, please ask all the states if you have this type of benefit, so we can kind of work together and see what's working for other states. So there is a real tight network of collaboration with the other states.
Also, this is Christie speaking. The VOCA, the Office for Victims of Crime, and the VOCA regulates pretty much in the basics of what states have to do. So there are certain VOCA regulations that say what benefits must be offered, including benefits to domestic violence victims. So if you look up the VOCA regulations, you can see right down the road, all states must do these 6 or 7 things. And one thing I wanted to mention about working with other states is that usually, unlike California, the programs are very small and the administrative funding is very limited for the program. So there's a few people doing a lot of work, but usually they're real willing to talk to you and talk about what's going on. Sorry, our phone is ringing.
I don't know how to shut it off.
Can you still hear us?
Yeah, that's fine. Let me fly into some more of these questions. We got a variety of questions about some of the statistics you cited early on in the presentation. One of them is, out of the $94,027,000 that you quoted, how much was for domestic violence victims, and how much was for other crime victims, if you know?
Okay, let's see.
I don't think I do know that. We do know that offhand, but I'll write that down, and if I can get that number, I'll provide it to you in materials later.
Christie will do that, but I think for the 0809, it was around $16 million, and it's interesting because domestic violence, how we can capture it in our system, we're looking for that 273.5, which is a penal code for California, but we know how it spreads out. So where it's related to the mental health, where it's related to medical, where it's related to other areas where it would capture domestic violence as well, you know.
Right. But you think the
Also,
number's somewhere around 16 million that actually related to domestic violence victims?
yeah, specifically, but we will clarify that for you, okay?
And also, as with any domestic violence statistic, you have to take into consideration that some of those our crime code is not necessarily going to be that penal code. It may be a homicide or that
Right.
doesn't would show up there, so it could be a little higher than that.
Absolutely. Let me just keep moving here. We've got a lot of questions. Here's another. Working with sexual assault victims, they often give up working with law enforcement because they feel ashamed and blamed sometimes by the agency or an investigating officer. Victims sometimes determine that it's pointless to continue to participate. How does your organization respond to this type of situation, which is quite common, especially in acquaintance rape?
We do have take a very dedicated look at those, because I think that when you're looking at lack of cooperation with law enforcement, there's a lot of factors that go into that, and you're right, not everybody can make it the whole way through the process, and especially not every acquaintance rape or sexual assault is ever going to make it to charging. And so one of the requirements of our program is that a crime does not need to be charged, because that is just not always going to happen in these cases. So we don't require that, and we do look at how much the victim has done, like in the beginning, were they cooperative and they just got tired. Sometimes a relationship between a law enforcement officer and a victim will sour for some reason, and so we try and look beyond that, maybe talk with the advocate and see what's gone on. So we do try and get a little bit more information, and that's one case where it's really good for the advocate if something doesn't work for somebody in compensation to give them enough emotional support to be able to appeal, because we are very friendly in our appeal process. People don't know that, so sometimes they're reluctant to appeal if there is a denial.
Okay. That's very helpful. Here's another question. Working with the cold case unit in Los Angeles Police Department, we are increasingly working with victims whose crime occurred 5 to 10 years ago. They obviously did not file a claim at that time, but are now experiencing the emotional trauma as a result of being contacted by the cold case unit due to a DNA hit and identification of the suspect. Are those victims eligible to apply even though they are outside the time frame you outlined?
In most cases, Casey, yes, they would. We don't guarantee anything, but what we strongly encourage is that we get that application. Under statute, that's specifically how we can qualify a claim that's past that deadline as far as our timeline. The late causes gives good reason to why we would allow that at this time. So we strongly encourage for those applications to come forward.
Each application that is filed past the deadline, that we ask people to file a late reason reply form, and so if they write on that reply form, detectives contacted me and they're working on this case now, then that usually will suffice to pass that good cause and that the case has been resurrected and they're working with prosecuting it.
Okay. Here's another question. Can you explain a bit further the concept of, quote, involvement in the crime, unquote, as a reason for claim denial? Working with domestic violence victims, it seems like this line often can be blurry with all of the dual arrests that might happen and things of that nature that seem to happen so frequently in domestic violence cases. So that's an interesting question, because obviously in jurisdictions in California that aren't doing very good work in domestic violence from a law enforcement perspective, we do see these kind of messy cases where they might be deemed mutual combat, or they might be deemed that the victim, quote, unquote, is involved in the crime because they may have fought back or there may have been injuries on the perpetrator. So can you talk a little bit about that, because that issue definitely comes up regularly around the state? Sure.
This is Christie. And it does get difficult sometimes. But what we try and do when we have a situation like that, is we try and coach our folks who are reviewing eligibility to look beyond just the police report. If it seems like the police police officers, all they have to say is mutual combat. You know, you can try and find past history of domestic violence, what's gone on in that relationship before, and sometimes look, just as you know, as all of us do when we're looking at these situations, you look at who's the primary aggressor, who's got, you know, were some of the injuries defensive? You know, you just have to really look at the situation, but we do try and do that, and sometimes it means having to go out and get a little bit more information from an advocate or look for past police reports.
Yeah, or this is JoAnn, we will, you know, contact law enforcement, and maybe now where that was the reporting officer, that now we have the investigating officer that we can talk to and kind of sort out the details. But yes, we see that on a routine basis, and we really do look at our cases like that. They have to be so individual. There are so many different circumstances that could have occurred.
I got to say, I've seen a lot of, though, as I read police reports on cases, just over the last few years, there's been lots of improvement, well, not improvement, but like just more sophistication in how people are writing this. And I think all of the discussions that we've had as a group over the last 10 years has really made it a lot clearer and a lot easier to read the police report and pick up all of those factors.
Well, I think one of the things that I'll just add to this is that we see this in our family justice centers in particular, not just in California, but around the country. When agencies are collaborating together and really working together and providing you a more comprehensive picture of what they've seen and what they've determined happened, it's obviously very beneficial to you than just a cold application or the attaching of a police report that may not really explain what all went on and what the investigation found and what all the information was on follow-up. So would you agree with that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Here's another question from Sarah Martin. When the emergency award is denied, can someone reapply under the regular non-emergency payment system?
Yeah, that's a real simple. If we say we're not qualifying your emergency award, it just falls into our regular process. And that application that they originally submitted just now isn't a regular application we will look at. It's just at that time we may not have had enough information to qualify it. We're looking for what was the emergency, why is it an emergency award? Is there expenses that need to be paid immediately? You know, if there's nothing to substantiate that we need to make an immediate payment, we will put it back through our regular process.
And the issue for advocates in California that comes up with that is the letter is kind of confusing. So sorry about that, but it's hard to explain that your emergency award is denied, but your regular award is moving forward, and they don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And the reason the most common reason that we aren't able to treat something as an emergency award is that the application comes in with no bills attached, and so if we have nothing to pay, there's no way we can call it an emergency. So if an advocate is working on an application and then maybe they don't have the funeral burial contract, they need to write a note saying, I'm faxing you the funeral burial contract in 2 days. So, you know, or it's about to come, or just there's got to be something attached to that application to show there's going to be an expense.
Right, okay. Let me keep flying here because we have many questions and I'm running out of time. Are women who are undocumented immigrants able to receive benefits?
Absolutely. If you are in California from no matter where you're from, you can qualify for our program.
And you don't need to have a Social Security number.
No.
Okay, great. Here's a question from Christine Rowe, who's with the Center for Community Solutions here on the team at the San Diego Family Justice Center. She said, if victims can seek, I'd like to know if victims can seek money for clothes and supplies after they have gone into a shelter under the relocation rules.
I want to say, yes, sometimes we can. We can take that into consideration. And specifically what we're looking at is when they left immediately. You know, law enforcement, somebody said they had to leave right now. And we recognize that, and through all of our different points of verification, as we talked about, that we can see that they went right into a shelter or they went right into a hotel. They didn't have time to grab anything. And we do have the ability and the authority to do that, and that would be considered under emergency basis.
Okay. There are a number of questions around employment issues for victims of domestic violence who may have not been allowed to work and they leave the home, and questioning whether or not they have any ability to seek income support if they haven't had a job. I don't think they can they?
No, they can't. That's one area that we, for years, we've talked about trying to maybe the opportunity of what we call replacement costs, but we haven't made forward through legislation on that. Something that's still on, we keep it alive. We keep a pilot light under it. That it's we recognize that for the most part that domestic violence victims and women for the most part there's the sole a breadwinner in the home, and that's usually the offender in those cases. So, but we have to show that there was an actual loss of income from the direct victim.
That does vary from state to state, so good to check with your own state on issues like that.
Good. Then Sandra Fernandez had a number of questions, but I'll try to pick a couple here. What proof or evidence does the victim need to show to the landlord or the victim compensation program when she has moved and domestic violence abuse continues even after she's moved to a new address when he finds her? And obviously then she would need to relocate again. I'm not exactly sure what she's asking, but it sounds to me like multiple relocation expenses are covered up to the $2,000 limit.
Yes.
A violation of restraining order, some kind of dispatch report showing a violation of a restraining order, or a police report showing a violation of a restraining order is something we commonly have on that kind of situation, but it can be other things.
Okay.
As well as where maybe there's family members that are harassing, the victim if the offender is now incarcerated or the offender is being released. Those are real flags for us.
Yeah. Okay. There's a number of questions about reimbursement pieces. I'll try to synopsize them. There's a number of domestic violence agencies. These would be true, actually, of a couple of family justice centers, too, and sexual assault agencies, for that matter, who have, like, small emergency funds. They get donations. They try to raise money for emergency funds. Can agencies pay up front for emergency funds and then later seek compensation for the expenses that are covered or not?
They can, but it's tricky because very, very commonly they'll pay for something that we can't cover, and then they'll submit the expense to us, and there was nothing we can do about it. So it's something that you would want to really talk to us about, but it's really the best thing is to go to the local county victim witness center and try and access their revolving funds, because then you know it. But that doesn't always work. So it's really it really depends on what's being paid for.
Right. We have paid these in the past. We treat these kinds of funds, these emergency petty cash funds, as we've referred to them, that as a provider, if you will, and if the application is allowed, they can be submitted, and we will, we have to verify as far as one thing, is it a benefit that we have the authority to pay, and through our regular process like we would any other bill.
Okay. There's a number of questions here about dental coverage and whether TMJ is a dental expense that's covered when someone's been hit in the face, for example, or has injury impacts related to jaw function.
Well, one of the things I want to say for the dental portion of it, and it's good for everybody to know in California, is that is one of the only benefits that we will pre-qualify. And we have staff on staff that receive, dental estimates, and as well as the different information from the provider as far as the relatedness of it. So I don't want to say yes. I don't want to say no. It's on an individual basis. And many times I've seen that we have paid for TMJ because, you get pretty stressed after this kind of a situation. So, again, I would highly encourage that for any type of dental related to their incident, that the dentist is happy to forward that information to us for review, and we'll tell them, give them a pre-authorization of what we can and what we can't cover.
Okay. Let me keep flying here because we still have a lot more questions. We're down to about the last 15 minutes here. There's a question from Pam Wright. When submitting invoice or request for payment as a mental health provider, how long does it usually take to be reimbursed?
Well, sometimes it may take 3 months. It may take 4 months. In California, with the Victims of Crime program, we have what are called our nonprofit providers, and we have contracts with them that they submit applications to us that qualify. There are no reimbursements, meaning there's no medical, there's no insurance, and we will put them through our what we call our rules engine, which is a automated process. So we've, through the crime, looking at their treatment plan, we pre-authorize these payments for mental health providers. In that case, we could turn around a bill within 7 to 10 days.
If you've got a provider who has an existing relationship with you.
Right, and if we have our provider, we really try to educate them. If they will bill us on a standard billing form, which is the language, it's called the HCFA 1500, and fill that out completely, that zips through our automated system. So we try to educate all providers through our customer service line when they're calling and say, if you complete it on this form, it will move much quicker.
Yes, and we have a section devoted to working with providers. Our mental health section works specifically with mental health providers, and they'll come out to agencies and train folks and talk about how to submit the bills and work directly with the billing department to make sure it's as streamlined as possible.
And anybody that's interested in California, our mental health manager, Robin Fummelby, which is LCSW, we will come out to you and talk to you about our mental health program.
Okay. Let me keep flying here, and we'll try to keep the answers as short as we can just because there's so many more questions still coming in. Do you pay attorney's fees for the filing of appeals?
We pay attorney fees if it's they act as a representative up to $500 or 10% on application.
Okay, if they're representing the victim.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Here's one from a survivor of domestic violence. She says, my children and I have been approved to receive counseling as a result of domestic violence, but we have moved out of state. Can we use the funds for counseling here in the state that we live in? I don't quite understand her circumstance, but the answer would be yes, right? You don't have to be receiving your counseling in California.
No, you don't. We do. You do need to make sure you're going to a licensed provider in the state that you're in, and the license. Generally, correct me if I'm wrong, JoAnn, but generally we cover whatever kind of provider that state comp program would cover. So you can check with your local, like if you move to Oregon, check with your Oregon state comp program, find out what they cover, and we will then cover the equivalent.
And reimburse it at our rate.
Yeah, at our rate.
Okay.
Do that.
Yes. So the short answer is yes, Casey.
Yeah, the long answer is longer.
There's a number of questions about stalking victims. With strong supporting documentation, does the Victim Compensation Program provide assistance with relocation and security systems for stalking victims?
The short answer would be yes. Through our verification process we talked about previously, yes.
Right. Obviously, there's a lot of documentation that would need to be part of that, but definitely stalking is obviously a serious crime in California, as it is in most states, and a victim of stalking is able to access services. Next question, is there a training on the database? I have a hard time understanding the language. Can I access the number of mental health treatment sessions after a claim was approved in the CARES database?
Oh, that's CARES, C-A-R-E-S.
Oh, CARES, there you go.
Is that question from an advocate or a provider?
It's hard to say. There's nobody identifying with it. But I guess that's the question, is there training available on the CARES database?
There is. If you're an advocate working in a California Victim Assistance Center, one of the 58 centers one in each county, I can help you with getting hooked up on that database and making sure you know what you're doing. If you're a provider, we do have a pilot for provider access online, and eventually when that goes live, we'll have lots of training for providers across the state so they can look up their bills.
This is the pilot you mentioned for the various counties that are experimenting right now with it?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just try to keep flying because there's many more. Can a California nonprofit that provides counseling to victims of domestic violence provide the mental health counseling for victims, or must it be a private provider? What is the reimbursement rate? Thank you for the great information you're providing for victims. So let me sort that out a little bit. Can a California nonprofit that provides counseling to DV victims provide the mental health counseling? I think they're asking, does it have to be an independent provider? I guess the answer is it's got to be somebody licensed, right?
Right. It just needs to be somebody licensed. We have many nonprofit associations that provide service, and it would be their licensure, and then we would pay at our standard rate.
There's one other thing. If it's a nonprofit that's funded by other federal funds, it has to be there has to be a reimbursable expense. And
right,
so
something that's not covered by a grant-funded position or something.
Right. They have to charge money, basically.
Yeah.
They have to send a bill to the victim and a bill to every victim, not just the comp victims, the ones that have compensation, and then they have to not be
Federally funded, yeah.
They can't be federally funded so that it's not a double use of
to provide that service, right. Here's the next question. I am working with formerly incarcerated women who have recently been released from prison. Many of these women have histories of domestic violence in which they are direct victims of abuse. Are they eligible to access compensation? Often women who have been incarcerated have themselves been violated, and this violation has never been addressed, consequently leading to contact with the criminal justice system. This is a unique population that seems to be overlooked. That's a question from a woman named Elaine Sutton, which obviously runs into this issue of convicted felon, I suppose, if they're coming out of state prison. But if they're misdemeanor, if they've been in jail for a misdemeanor, that's a different analysis, right?
Yes, and that person, if they're otherwise eligible, if we can show that there's preponderance of evidence that a crime occurred to them, and there's a timely application, we can get past all of those things, the felon status doesn't affect eligibility. It just, if they're on parole, we wouldn't be able to pay for any expenses incurred while they're on parole, but afterwards we can if it's otherwise eligible. So it's just...
So the trigger is whether they're on parole if they're coming out of state prison.
It's felony, probation, parole, or incarceration.
Okay. But I want to emphasize what you said earlier, which again is has to do with the framing of it, the comprehensive nature of the information provided to you, and of course the appellate process, which allows somebody to really try to frame the issue in much broader terms and with more information on an appeal. I think that's probably an important piece that a lot of people I don't think take advantage of.
Yes, and I would actually echo the comment that it is a really underserved population, as well as folks coming out of alcohol and drug rehab too. That's where issues often come up of abuse that hadn't been identified before. So
here's an interesting one. This is a question from a woman named Francine Maltz. She says if a person has Medi-Cal, but there are no providers in Medi-Cal that specialize in trauma treatment for domestic violence, can you have a licensed agency providing that? I guess it goes to this issue of whether there's another source of reimbursement if they don't have if they're under Medi-Cal but they don't have specialized counseling available for someone who's been a victim of trauma.
Usually in most cases that Medi-Cal, they are only allotted to serve so many Medi-Cal patients. They will look to Medi-Cal patients for people that are non-victims and fill those slots, and then they will provide treatment to victims of crime and bill us that way. I'm going to say, put myself out on a ledge there. We're pretty lenient about the whole Medi-Cal and mental health. We're looking to see if they are receiving treatment, they are Medi-Cal, and the provider doesn't accept it, which in many, many cases, that's most of the types of applications that we receive. We just go about and make payments for them. We encourage the victims to get into mental health treatment.
And the same thing, Casey, goes for insurance. If you have a medical insurance and you don't have a provider in your network, and this is common in rural areas, that has there's no provider in your insurance network that has the skills that you need, then you can go out of network, and we will cover that.
Okay, there's a number of questions here from Amy Lee in Alameda County. I'll try to pick one. She says, often in our county, law enforcement neglects to check the box on the police report indicating that the domestic violence victim needs to relocate, although the victim later moves out and gets a TRO. What can be done about that? I just learned today that you can get the same verification from a mental health provider. Does this person need to be a licensed therapist, or can it be a social worker or shelter worker?
It needs to be a licensed therapist, which LCSW or MFT, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, an intern working under an MFT or LCSW. I mean, it's pretty wide open. We're looking for law enforcement for that documentation, but we don't just look there. And I just want to express that we're looking at all different types of verifications to qualify people for that relocation benefit.
There's also a number of questions from a friend of mine, Cordelia Clapp, asking about assistance for American Indian and Alaska Native DV victims who are in the state of California. And if you know the percentage of them that receive services through victim compensation.
We can get back to you on that. Of course, that they would have to complete that identifying information on their application, which is our VOCA information. Not everybody does, but we work collaboratively with the American Indian Association throughout California, and Christie and myself have, for over the years, have participated in that, reaching out to that community. So we can get some measurement for you, but it depends on if they're completing that information. Not everybody does, and it's not a requirement.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do try to work closely with tribal governments, as we do with all local governments, and we have the victim assistance centers that are located in counties where there's multiple tribal governments, or really do kind of try and make sure that the services are extended to everybody.
Right.
And this week in Humboldt County, there was actually a conference where Humboldt County is Northern California, where we are represented there, and that's through networking and working with the district attorneys and the different, I think there were 7 tribal communities up there that, so we just continue to work on that.
Okay. Let me try to grab a couple more. We've got about 2 minutes left before we finish our 90-minute webinar. How do you define a crime if an abuser beats a mother and a child and a sister who is also present? How many crimes is that? I mean, obviously that's an analysis that law enforcement has to do, but essentially you're talking about multiple criminal offenses, and each victim, whether they're direct or derivative, is still a victim for the purposes of the compensation program, right?
Very well explained, yes.
2 years of running the compensation office in San Diego, and I actually remember some of these things. Wow.
You're doing a great job, Casey.
Are child abductions considered eligible crimes for compensation? That's from JoAnn Zorza.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
We've had several cases over the years that, they've taken them to South America, out of the country, and have worked through our emergency process to, get them back when they've been identified and have been, pardon? I don't know. Yes, we do help in that area, and just strongly recommend somebody come forward to us so that we can see how we can help them.
Good. Here's another question from Amy Lee that's a good one. She says, I work with domestic violence victims and have had trouble getting lost wages from the victim compensation program. My understanding is that the victim needs to get a doctor or mental health provider to verify that the victim has a medical condition that does not allow her or him to work. For many domestic violence victims, this requirement is problematic because they may not have a disabling medical condition but simply need time to stabilize their lives and heal emotionally before going back to work, dealing with court, finding housing, going to counseling. I had a client who was denied a victim compensation claim, although she lost her job because of the domestic violence crime, but couldn't get a medical verification that she could not work. So there's a real-life set of facts.
Well, we do look in our statute that there is a disability. However, we do recognize that there is a mental health disability. We can, I believe, up to 6 months, on an emotional injury, reimburse for lost income. So it's not just a physical injury. We also look to emotional injury. After 6 months, if it's from an LCSW or MFT, then we're looking for to have them go to a psychiatrist if it's going to be an extended period.
Okay, well that's an excellent point. So during that first 6 months, you can be talking to a mental health professional as well. You don't need a medical verification from a medical doctor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if that's, sometimes that's hard to obtain, but always good to use that appeal process.
Yes.
And many times we'll help walk through the mental health therapist as far as what we need, what we're looking for to assist that victim. So we'll work directly with the therapist to get what we need.
Good. Okay, Brenda is waving her arms in the background. She's jumping up and down. That means our 90 minutes are over. I want to thank Brenda Lugo for her leadership in hosting these webinars. JoAnn Goodwin and Christie Munson from the California Victim Compensation Program, thank you for just amazingly good information about the program and for your commitment to the work you're doing to help crime victims. So I just want to thank you both for participating in our webinar today.
Well, thank you, Casey, Brenda, and the Family Justice Center for allowing us this opportunity to share our information.
Good. So on behalf of the National Family Justice Center Alliance, I want to thank you all for joining us. If you want to be able to access this webinar, you can go to familyjusticecenter.org, become a member of the National Alliance, which is free. And then once you become a member, you can actually then access this in our resource library. Our website is listed on the screen for you there. And again, there's a whole host of good information for you on that website. I do want to give a shout out to the Alameda County Family Justice Center as we close our webinar for their very innovative work in bringing victim compensation specialists. And I want to thank the Victim Compensation Program for working with them to locate their compensation specialists inside the Family Justice Center to assist victims with applications. They're there 2 days a week. They come on an on-call basis. And I'm just so honored that they're part of that program. Both Nadia and Nicole, who work with the Victim Compensation Program, who are there with the Alameda County Family Justice Center, and Riverside Family Justice Center as well, who has them close by. So thank you to all of you for participating in this webinar, and thank you for the work you do to care for victims of domestic violence.
Goodbye.